Hello and welcome to the Delirium engine, where we take certain things like Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop gaming, and other games of the imagination to the point of scholarly pursuit. Here we are today in an interesting sort of new segment, new episode kind of thing. I don't know exactly what I want to call it, but we have a new type of episode that we're gonna run. A little bit off week, I guess. Today I'm with my good friend the DuckLord. Say hello.
Hello.
And right now we're gonna do what I'm gonna call a rules for GM epilogue, as you can see on the screen. What this is a sort of people who have something to say or want to either pick my brain or contest some of the things that we said in one of the previous segments. In this particular case, I think we were going to be discussing GMing. So, with the rules for GMs as a given, we'll be talking about what he thinks about those rules or what he wants to talk about in terms of GMing. As I said before, anybody who wants to come on the show and have a little debate or whatever, they're free to do just that. With that said, though, I guess I'll start by simply asking: Have you listened to the rules for GM, or have you read them? Do you know them? Do you want to recap?
Are you talking about the rules as of the Delirium engine, or the rules in, say, D&D, like the...
Oh, no, we're talking about the Delirium engine ones, like the ones that I covered in the series, Rules for GMs, or Rules for Successful GMs.
I've had a synopsis, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and have a full listen to the whole thing.
That's a sad story, friend. You're cutting me deep here, know that, right?
It is a sad story.
Yeah, you should be ashamed. This is a popular show on the YouTubes, right?
Yes, it is.
There you go. But, well, do you want to recap? Like, I have the piece of paper right here with the rules for GMs. Okay,
let's go over that real quick.
Yeah, just so we can have some sort of grounding, and if you want to pause me at any time, just do so.
Well, we'll go through them one by one, and if I have...
And the rules for GMs on the screen in the previous episodes might be a little bit different than these ones, but the premise is the same. The ones that were displayed in the episodes, they were slightly cleaned up because the old rules were they were a little bit more verbose. So, rule 1, your story doesn't matter.
Truth.
Yeah. So that's the I think that was your plot is stupid. Rule 2 is that's the setting. Actually, you know what? Here. Let's bring it up. Instead of using this goofy piece of paper, I will actually bring them up on the computer screen. So you'll have to excuse my awesome radio powers here, and we'll go to my sweet channel. Google Chrome is different than Firefox. That's really strange.
Yeah, it's almost like they're two different programs.
No, but like the actual interface for YouTube is different.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's a lot simpler in Chrome. Okay, rules for successful GMs. We got your plot is stupid and doesn't matter. The details of your setting are irrelevant and brook much tampering. System implies setting. Choose wisely. Your characters are not cooler. Stop showing them off. That's the GM's characters are not cooler than the player's characters. Torture, rape, and sexual encounters should fade to black.
There's no place for ERP on a pen and paper.
Game balance is inherent to the story. That's basically you can't have overpowered characters. And no escalators and no barriers. So the GM's job is not to give people a free ride, but it's not there to create artificial barriers to their... Like, you're not supposed to build a wall that they can't pass. You're not supposed to build... likewise, you're not supposed to build an escalator that they can just stand on and it'll take them to victory.
Right.
This is the idea. So that's sort of the rules for GMs. The actual like the handwritten ones were a little bit sloppier. And
The only thing that I would have to say is about the system breeding the setting. I don't think that's inherently true because you can adapt any system to do just about anything.
well, let's crush this thing. Like system is inherent to setting. You don't think so?
No, I don't think so because yes, like you can have like system being like Dungeons and Dragons. You're talking, or
Sure, it doesn't matter.
or cast or something like that.
Okay.
Right. Like first of all, like let's take a system called cast.
No, well, yeah, okay.
And-
We're gonna shill cast hard here.
Yeah. But I mean, a system like that can be used in any setting.
Yeah, but it implies the setting that it's being used in. Like if you play, say, let's take Shadowrun. If you play Shadowrun using the Shadowrun system,
Well,
it creates a different scenario than if you play Shadowrun using the cast system. Like even if you developed cast to be as close to Shadowrun as possible, the mechanics in cast would imply a different setting. Just even if it's only slightly. But like, say you ran Shadowrun in D&D, like in the Dungeons and Dragons, like 5th edition system. Somehow you manipulated it, and then you ran it in like Shadowrun, or Shadowrun 4th versus Shadowrun 5th. Like they're fairly different systems. Like yeah, they're custom built to be what they are, but the implications of what is written in the book defines what's in the system, and that's what that tries to say.
and I get that, but I also feel that rules in a book for the beauty of pen and paper versus say a video game or a movie or anything like that is that you have the freedoms to do things in pen and paper that you don't have in any other real media.
Okay.
It's open, it's free. So in any system, every rule, and this, especially D&D fanatics right now are probably going to find everything of mine online and flame it.
I doubt it, but
But
we're not that popular yet.
any sort of rule in a rule book is made to be either bent or broken. Because if a situation comes up where that rule hinders the story, which is really the most important thing in not particularly your story, but the story that the players are creating as they're playing. If a rule hinders that or gets in the way of enjoyment or storytelling, that rule's got to be changed.
You're implying Rule 0, which I've officially said is trash.
Well, we're gonna have a conversation then, because
Okay, so let me quickly grab this piece of paper here, and I will start writing down the things that we need to have a goddamn conversation about. Okay? We have to start getting your heads on straight here. So, system implies setting. Okay, I'm just writing. You can write. And then the other one is,
So guys.
not much, just podcasting.
Oh, my bad.
System implies setting, and then the other one would be, we were saying, Rule 0 is trash. Both true statements, but, we'll have to get you on the straight and narrow for this one.
well,
Okay, so, like, the system implies setting thing. Like, for example, let me see if I can convert you to this concept without too much hassle. Okay. So, in one system, you have a magic system that a wizard can cast as many fireballs as he wants in a day. Like, just boom, as much as he wants, he just casts fireballs, right? And in another system, you have a more D&D style one where it's like he can only really cast like 4 or something like that, right? So both of these rulings produce a different setting. Would you agree?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. So therefore, system, which is what we're talking about here, is implying the setting you play in.
I misunderstood setting. I thought setting as you meant like fantasy or steampunk or...
No, well, some of that too, right? Like if your system is like, if the system is like only has rules for swords and like catapults or whatever, then you're obviously playing in some sort of fantasy setting, and there's magic and other things. Like if there's rules for that, those rules are going to imply the kind of setting you're playing in,
But those
regardless of what you're actually playing. Like you could say, oh yeah, we're playing a futuristic game, but we're going to use the 5th edition D&D rules to the T. Wow. Like at the end of the day, you know, you could say that yeah, it's a robot, but you know, you've just reskinned an orc. Yes. You're really just playing a fantasy game where you've just said that the orc is a robot.
But when role-playing, using any rule to the T is a mistake.
Well, I'm just using that as an example, right? And I would... it's not that you have to use the rules to the T. I'm just saying that, like, using the rules of D&D in a setting that you just randomly declared as a futuristic space sci-fi adventure, right? All you're really doing is reskinning a fantasy setting, and you're going to end up with a fantasy game.
Well,
it'll probably play a lot more like Star Wars than Star Trek.
Have you heard of Starjammer?
Spelljammer, you mean?
Or Spelljammer,
yes.
Which is the space version of
D&D.
Of D&D.
Yeah. And they have all sorts of special rules that imply the setting as well.
Right. And that's what I was saying. I was saying like a rule can be modified to adjust any setting.
Well, you can create a rule set for any setting and try to imply that setting with a rule set. But if you're playing a different rule set that doesn't match what you expect the setting to be, the rule set's going to eventually overtake whatever you think your setting is.
And that brings it to what a good DM should be doing, or GM, DM, whatever you want to call them. They should be able to know when and when not to change or modify rules in order to facilitate story without making it either automatic win mode or, you know, super difficult, ridiculous mode.
Sure, okay, yeah, that's fine. But you would then agree, though, that the system does imply the setting. In
the way you were meaning it, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So that's 1 point. That's 1 point off the belt. Excellent. We'll take that as a win. We'll take the W on that. Okay, so next, Rule 0 is trash. Okay, please tell me why it's not trash. Why is Rule 0 a valuable tool to be used?
All right, so we have no misunderstandings. Describe Rule 0 for everyone.
Once again, let me look up, because last time when we did that, we looked it up on the Google. Rule 0. I think we looked up the Urban Dictionary Rule 0 and the Rule 0 D&D4 wiki. Okay? So, the Urban Dictionary rule is the unwritten rule of tabletop role-playing games. The game/dungeon master has the right to veto anything any player says. He has the right to change any rule or make up his own. He need not explain why he chooses to do these things. If players complain, the GM may choose any of the following to do to the player. Slap, call a dumbass, restrict snackage privileges, and or threaten injury to in-game character, be it through loss of XP, health, items, or gold. That's the ridiculous one. But the D&D 4 wiki does a pretty okay job. It's Rule 4 is the Rule 0 in tabletop role-playing game. Is the unwritten but commonly understood rule that the game master can override published game rules for any reason.
Yes.
And I say that's trash.
No. And
okay. Please explain why.
Okay. This is why it's not trash. It's important to have Rule 0, but it's important to know how to use Rule 0.
Okay.
If it's going to impede story or like the players having a good time, that's really what it's all about. The players having a good time. As a GM, you are not God. You are not God of this realm. You are not the ruler of everything. And that's the first thing you have to understand before.
Well, that's what Rule 0 implies, though, is that you are.
But you need to be in a certain mindset to use it, or else it is going to be trash.
Oh, I see. You have to be a noble tyrant.
Well, tyrant is exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of GMs feel that they get a power trip when they're DMing.
Okay.
And that's opposite of what a GM should feel. They are literally working for the players as a storyteller. The only time you should bust out Rule 0, which from time to time I feel has to happen, is when it facilitates their enjoyment, their storytelling. It's not your story, as a GM that you're trying to tell. It's the player's story that you are trying to bring out and facilitate.
Yeah, but
So if you have
actual, like, physical reality is sometimes a thing that is required to, sometimes a player just can't do everything at once.
Exactly.
Right? And if the story of the player is, I'm going to fail because physical reality is the ultimate enemy, then Rule 0 shouldn't be used to help them.
Well,
even though you're facilitating the story, all you're doing is the exact same thing that a shitty GM would do when he's trying to be a tyrant, but you're doing it the other way around, in reverse. You're like, no, you can fly. It turns out you're capable of it, because I don't want to inhibit your beautiful story. Look, you've sprouted wings. No, there are no rules that allow you to sprout wings, but you've done it. Wow, a pot of gold lands in front of you, and you spread the wealth to all of the kids and the babies and the children, because we don't want to inhibit your story of goodness.
I think you're going to the extreme point of that. I mean,
You have to go to the extreme to figure out if something is a stupid idea or not.
well, no, because a little bit of something goes a long way. You've never heard that, probably. Somewhere
Oh,
along the-
I've heard of it, but you have to take ideas to the logical extreme to see what exactly you're going to get out of it. And
Like-
perhaps that's a difference in philosophy, but
For instance, let's use D&D as an example,
Okay.
because D&D is a terrible system, in my opinion.
sure.
And it's overridden with rules all over the place. Rules for this, rules for that.
Yeah, except for the thing you want to do at the time.
Let's say you run into, usually in a campaign, the first couple encounters you're going to have are just a couple of gimme easy encounters, usually.
Okay, yeah. Sure.
We'll
We'll call it the milk run.
Yeah, it's always you always start with a little bit of a milk run.
Yeah, it's a way I use it often to gauge whether or not the players are really strong physically or
Right.
like what kind of game they're trying to play.
Now, let's say because of a bad roll, a player is going to die right off the hop, first
Straight.
encounter.
Great. Let them die.
No,
Why?
because
That's the rules of the game. You all agreed to play that game.
I disagree in this case.
Why?
Because if it was a challenging encounter or something like that, but this is supposed to be a milk run, that's the point. The point is they're supposed to get through this and
Yeah.
build themselves up as heroes.
And the player jumped into the lava. You can't.
Well, no, I'm talking about, you've got 38 hit points, your enemy has 4 hit points, you keep rolling ones and missing, and he just crit you once accidentally.
Maybe he's got to run. Maybe some bad luck has hit. Like, why is the 30 hit point guy not hitting the guy and not running? Why is he like, oh man, this goblin is obviously infinitely more skilled than I am, but I'm gonna keep slashing at it. I'm slowly bleeding out. This goblin's got me. I'm holding my guts in my hands, but I can't run. I better keep swinging.
Okay, well, let's say there was
What?
no swing. Let's say first turn...
Should he sprout wings then?
No, first
Be a beautiful
turn,
butterfly?
first turn, he crits, player dies.
Okay.
Player doesn't even get a chance to react.
Okay.
First run, milk run,
All right.
and this happens.
So what rule
And-
set are you using that you get a free crit that insta-kills someone?
Oh, D&D, there's tons of stuff for that.
Well, there's no D&D that gives you insta-kill crit. Like that goblin,
Well,
like you got
okay,
a 30 hit point
you would
guy.
be unconscious.
Yeah, but this
not
is the
dead,
rule set
but-
that everyone has chosen to play with. Okay,
Wow.
if you want to play a very light rule setting, where everybody is under the understanding that the players aren't really going to die because whatever.
No, I'm not saying the players shouldn't die. I'm talking about because you're trying to facilitate your setting with their story, right?
Yeah, but their story might be only one session long because they died.
Wow.
And yeah, it sucks, but that's part of the game. Because without the characters being able to die session 1 in the goddamn milk run, there's no sense of danger at all. Like, why would they even be worried? Oh, this is the milk run session. I don't care.
Well, then
I'll
let's
fight the goblin.
Let's
Well, the
go to
goblin's
the
not
extreme.
dying. Oh, I keep fighting it. We'll be fine.
Okay.
You're disemboweled. You're gonna die soon. No, this is the milk run. I'm not gonna die. I'll just keep swinging. Well, it didn't work out for you, bud. You're dead now. So that's a phone ringing that I'm gonna grab because this episode is horse crap. Nah, we'll let it ring. All right. Just keep talking. When the phone rang, we just sat there in silence.
Well,
Our
yes.
fine audio listening audience.
See,
I have to
and that's
listen to
where I
phone rings.
disagree. I mean, yes, there should be a sense of danger, but not right away. There should be setting. There should be a little bit of build-up before we start killing off characters. The player shouldn't.
Yeah, but even session 1 should have a sense of danger to it. And you can't have a sense of danger without risk, and you can't have risk without actual punishment for failure.
Sure, and okay, maybe my example's a little bad, but there is always a time I've ever found where you have to kind of give and take with the rules. And I know you're arguing for the sake of arguing because I've seen you do it.
Yeah, but I don't save the player if shit's going bad.
Not necessarily save the player.
Sometimes I'll be like, oh, how can I award a bonus to the player? Like I did it last session when I ran a game. You know, the one character was about to die, and like this roll needed to be basically a 20, or else the character was legit gonna die. Like he had water in his lungs, he wasn't breathing. Like, and the other guy didn't. He was a plant, so he couldn't breathe out. So you had to find some creative way to to basically get the water out of his system. Anyway, yeah, he didn't have the rules for it, but I'm like, okay, if you can describe to me sufficiently, I'll give you some story bonuses, which is within the rules of the system we were playing. And so he got it.
Well, yes,
And he used it.
but you're talking about cast, which is a system that you create, so you can create the rules on the fly.
But we started the game with that in mind, that we were running in the cast system. If you're going to run in the hardcore PvP super brutal town system, you're not going to give them the milk run.
Well, no.
Just make a description.
Now
let's
we're
hope we
talking
can
about
survive.
setting versus.
No,
versus
we're talking
anything
about
else.
the system. Like, if you want to play the hardcore system that doesn't give you any of that shit, any of that,
Then
happy
yes,
crap,
in
then no,
that-
you don't get to have it. But everybody agreed to play that.
Yes, but in that case, then Rule 0 wouldn't really exist because you're playing hardcore. That's something everyone is agreeing to do. I'm talking average party, maybe some players, this is their first time around.
But is it okay? Now,
You know, again, it's all. This is exactly what I'm saying. The whole idea of using Rule 0 is really, really, really situational. But it's got to be there because you have to be able to shape your game in order to create an entertaining experience for everybody.
you don't know. If you've chosen a decent rule set, then yeah, you can do it. If your game system is so bad that you can't facilitate an entertaining game without changing the rules of the system, then like Rule 0 is not the problem, or it's not the solution. That's a bandage to an already existing problem, some chronic issue called a shitty system.
Well,
So if you're playing this theoretical tabletop system where your 30 hit point character dies in one shot from the 4 hit point goblin, because I know Swampy, he uses crit tables. So one crit 20, dismember your arm, dismember your head, like you're done. Like the highest level character can literally die from like
the lowest
3
one.
lowest level guys who roll 20s.
Yes.
Right? And it's brutal, but that's in that system, and system implies the setting, combat is brutal. There's no fancy like, ha ha, I'm just so powerful, I can fight 100 goblins. It's like, no. Eventually one's gonna, like, there's a 5% chance with every attack that you are dead. Or pretty darn close to dead.
In that system, yeah. But again,
But that's the system that you chose when you started playing.
right.
And so you don't pick a system. You don't pick a difficult system that is unrelenting or very unforgiving, and then be like, oh, we're just gonna Rule 0 it so that it is forgiving.
well, in that
Don't
situation,
play
no.
that system in the first place.
In that situation, no. I agree. If you're going to be a hardcore player and you're going to play a hardcore system, then no, you shouldn't be Rule 0ing everything. I didn't say Rule 0 should be in every game. I said it should exist, and it should be very situational.
Okay.
See, you keep dodging that point.
What?
Because
the point that
you
the,
keep going to these extremes where you're talking about hardcore players playing
well,
hardcore games.
You're muddying about in the center into this perfect little area that you're like, your argument centers around, in this situation that I think it's necessary for this to happen, you should do this. Rule 0 is great. And I'm
I
saying
didn't say Rule Zero is great. I said it needs to exist.
It's necessary. You can override the rules of the game because you want to facilitate the player's victory. Because you feel...
Not necessarily victory, or demise, or pitfall, or depending on the story.
So there's this... Okay, so on the story that you're imposing on your players.
Yes.
Okay, well, I completely 100% disagree because this is not your story, as you said yourself.
No,
this
it
isn't
is your
the story
setting,
the GM has set up. This is the story of the players. And the players can fail. So if you give them free successes, you're imposing your will on their story.
Again,
and if
we're
you
not
give
talking
them
about
failures,
their successes.
If you give them failures, you're imposing your will on the story. So, like, in the same way that you're like, an arrow fires from the wall and kills you, you die. And the guy's like, wait, what? It's like, sorry, you hit a trap, you're dead. You shouldn't have gone that way. Told you not to go that way. You know, that's you imposing your will. Like, let's assume that this isn't even written down because you're just like, yeah, rule 0, there's a trap there. You know, rule 0, the poison arrow kills you instantly. Well, poison doesn't work that way. Yeah, sorry, that does in my world.
Well, again...
You know, you're facilitating the story of a dead PC because that's the story you, the GM, wanted. So that's no good. So only in your specific scenario, it's sort of an opposite version of that. It's like the PC steps into a trap and will die because you wrote a trap or you put in an encounter and that had the chance to kill them and it did. And you're like, well, I better butter it up so that they don't kill them.
So what
instead
you're
of a
saying,
poison arrow trap that kills them, you give them a poison pillow. You give them a happy pillow trap that saves them.
You're saying every game that you've planned, every session that you planned went exactly the way you thought it would go.
No, it's the exact opposite. It doesn't go the way I want it to go.
That's why it needs to exist.
But I don't care if the PCs die as a result
I'm not talking about PC death. I'm not
Or
even saying
what
that.
are you- okay,
that is
what
something
are
that
you
you
saying
are
then?
imposing.
Then what are you saying?
I'm saying in lots of different situations, things might not go the way anyone expects it to go.
That's fine.
Because of a stupid rule.
Embrace the chaos. And if the rule forces it to go in a weird way, great. That's part of the game. If it means that the player's ship literally falls apart, if it means that the player loses its limb, if it means that the player gets free treasure, if it means that the player suddenly becomes invincible, embrace it. It's great. We don't need Rule 0 to muck about with what's happening organically. Well, Rule 0 is the pruning shears of frickin' of storytelling. You're like, oh, I don't want that. Cut that out. We're going to change that on the fly.
We're not talking about storytelling either. We're talking about the rules. Like I said, D&D is a system so bogged down in rules that sometimes you can't even know them all. How many times have you been in a D&D game where your GM mistakenly interpreted a rule?
Let's say, yeah, it happens. And you know what you do? You call them on it. You say, this is not the rules that we agreed to play by. In the rules that we agreed to play by, this is how it works.
Yes.
And if the time has passed, and all the players agree, and all the players agreeing is not an argument. This is just like, if the time has passed and it becomes inconvenient for all players to not retcon this, then it's already over. It was a mistake. That's not Rule 0. That's a DM fucking up. And then everybody going, okay, well, we've already been playing for 3 hours since this fuck up. You know, it would change so much stuff, and the retcon isn't worth it. Or if it is worth it, they'll just fucking rewind.
Well, see, maybe we have a definition of Rule 0 then. Because that would be a good example.
That's not Rule 0. That wouldn't be Rule 0. That's just a mistake being remedied.
Well, mistakes happen.
There's no rule in any tabletop gaming saying that if the GM makes a fucking mistake, and then someone calls on it like an hour later, that it's already set in stone. Except for Rule 0. Rule 0 is the only one that allows the GM to do shit like that. Where it's like, no, I made that ruling. That's the way it is now.
Well...
And the player's like, dude, that's ridiculous, you know? Like, imagine if a player death was as a result of a GM's fuck-up, right? And then he's just like, no, Rule 0, it happened anyway. I like that part of the story now. You know... Or even the other way around, where it's like they fought a powerful monster and the GM he nerfed it by making it like, pillow mind flare, and the players are like, this is ridiculous, like run it properly or don't. He's like, no, Rule 0. This mind flayer's
Well, if the
pillow
players
40.
are saying we want this a certain way, and the GM's just like, you know what, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
Well, then that's a fucking brutally terrible GM to begin with.
Okay, well, fair enough. But
Like, that's
but
terrible.
your argument is Rule 0 is okay for the friendly tyrant.
No,
You know,
I didn't say that at all.
The GM.
You are saying that it's okay for a
it's 'cause
friendly
that's,
tyrant.
That's because that's what Rule 0 is implying for you. Like, you're saying if your GM is good, he's capable of changing the rules at whim, on his whim, for the purposes of whatever story he's trying to facilitate. Well, first of all, you shouldn't be trying to facilitate a story in the first place. You're a GM.
Setting, not story. Setting. The GM sets the setting. The players tell the story.
Sure, but what Rule 0 change can alter the setting?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Well, that's
It's-
probably a really good... We need to really talk about. We have to figure that out. You need to figure out an example if you want to continue with the argument, in my opinion. Because I'm talking about story changes, you know. And that's maybe where we're like we're not intersecting here, because you're talking about setting changes. And so if you can give me one example where Rule 0 is used to alter the setting. Like off the top of my head, like just
I hardly ever use it. I'm not saying that it's something that should be used so often that you should remember this shit. I'm just saying it needs to exist.
Okay. So just for the sake of discussion, I'm going to flip this around, right? So like, I'll say like, let me think of an example. I think I can think of an example where Rule 0 might be used for a setting, and then I'm going to try to attack it. This is me erecting a straw man and then tearing it down.
Okay.
But see if you follow with me on this. Okay. You've built a custom thing for your setting. The custom thing uses a different rule set than what would normally be allowed. You've homebrewed like a jellyfish monster of some sort, and it has slightly different way of doing things than other players are used to. Is that a Rule 0 thing that you're talking about?
Well, see, I wouldn't want to really say, because we're not actually playing the game and doing that. Because if you create something, and you made a good point on that earlier, if you create something that is going to cause, like, that may cause player death, well, then it's going to cause player death, and
that's the hurdle. That's the risk.
That's the risk that you take. Like, I don't think you should be, like, half of the excitement is when you get into those situations, and that's the worst place for Rule 0, is when you take away any sort of chance for danger or something like that. It's I'm not saying it needs to be there in order to make a player see. I know I kind of said that earlier, because it's a really hard thing for me to describe.
When is a good time to use Rule 0? Like, tell me a story of a perfect time when Rule 0 is available. Like when you're like, and the GM uses Rule 0 and the day is saved. You know, like this.
I would say it's more or less for NPCs that follow under a specific class or course of action that they're supposed to be taking, but during your setting they would be doing something else or not able to do something.
What do you mean during your setting?
Well, again, I would have to sit down and write a whole setting in order to facilitate this.
Okay, well, how about, I don't know, like, because I'm not following. That's the problem, is I'm not following what you're saying. And
okay,
you've got, like, just off the top of your head, make something up and do something. Is that the?
It's pizza.
Okay, well, go deal with the pizza, and I'll sort of shoot the breeze with our fine listeners. So we ordered a pizza because, like I said, this was sort of an off day, and the DuckLord here was interested in doing podcasting, but unfortunately he's not available on the Mondays when they're normally done. So I invited him over and said, hey, why don't you come over? We'll have a taste for this, and we'll talk about whatever. And I didn't want to interfere with the normal flow of the episodes, so we did this instead, which is why it was a little bit awkward getting together, because it's completely off the cuff, and I don't really know what we were going to talk about. He had an idea. He sort of mentioned that he wanted to talk about some of the DM stuff, but yeah, so we bought a pizza, and now we're going to talk about this and see if it turns out okay. We'll see if he likes the podcasting thing. So yeah, what kind of pizza did we get? Just for the listeners who are
A
interested.
Thunder Cape Special,
Oh, okay.
which has a whole bunch of crap on it, but no mushrooms.
Sweet. Nice. Looks good. We'll let that cool a bit.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so
It's so infre. Like I've personally only ever used it once or twice, and I couldn't tell you exactly what was going on when I used it, because I'm not saying the rules shouldn't be followed. I'm just saying the rules shouldn't be so concrete that they dictate absolutely everything. The DM should have a little bit of give and take with them.
well, okay.
Maybe that's not Rule Zero. Maybe we're arguing two different things here.
You're saying that the GM should have.
Like, they should follow the rules, and if ever there comes a reason to break a rule...
Well, you're talking about fudging, is what you're talking about. You're not talking about, like, the rules, walls have hardness, but not today. Because I'm the GM and I said so. You're talking about, like, oh, you attacked the goblin and you missed by 1, and, have a +1 because whatever.
Like, if...
Because you're cool.
Well, no, not even so much that.
Okay, so what are we talking about?
Kind of, sort of. Like, there are, like, especially in cast, right? Okay. Sometimes the numbers aren't always there, but we make players roll just to see how they do in general. Right? Like, say you're conversing with an NPC that you didn't expect them to run across, but during the natural course of things, it happened. So this guy doesn't really have any solid stats because you're sort of going
But I have a rough idea of
But you have a rough idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
And they roll kind of middling.
Okay, yeah.
So you don't really know if that's a pass or fail.
What do you mean I don't know?
Well, I mean, because you don't really have solid stats on this thing. You have a general idea.
Yeah, okay. I have a general idea, and I have a pretty good idea of what is a success and what's a failure.
A good idea, but can you tell it down to the number?
Yeah, usually I have 1 or 2 numbers that I keep in my head for specifically those kinds of situations. It's like, well, this guy's pretty good at it, beat a 10, beat a 20, beat a 30.
Right. But again, beat a 10, there's no rule for that. This is just kind of something that, because we weren't expecting
this is a shortcut. Like, that's not Rule 0 that we're talking about.
Okay, then maybe we're talking about two different things.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Let me explain my position and what I'm doing when I do that. Okay, so random NPC shows up that's like completely out of the blue, like whatever, these guys are like, I want to find a potion vendor in the sewer. And you're like,
right?
What the fuck is that? Okay, roll a little die, be like, okay, on a 6, I rolled a 6. There's a potion vendor in the sewer, I don't have any stats for him, I never prepared a potion vendor, I have no idea that this guy's here, but I'm like, okay, let's see if this guy's here. He's here. Alright. Make up some quick personality. They're like, I attack the potion vendor. I'm like, I don't have freaking stats for the potion vendor. Right? So you have to think to yourself, okay, what are the stats? And I didn't write this up. What I did is I'm reacting. And this is one of the jobs of the GM. It's in the rules for players, actually. The GM is reactive. And the players want to do a thing, and I don't have the numbers written up, so I have to ad-lib the numbers. I roughly think, okay, this potion guy's living in the sewer. He must be pretty strong. Okay, let's give him like in cast. Let's give him a 20 or 30 to defense, which is actually really horrible. But let's give him a 20 or 30 to defense, and let's give him like some throw potions powers, and we'll give him a couple of fireball potions, and we'll call it a day after that. And anything else, I don't know. We'll figure it out when we go. Yeah. But you're basically in your head establishing what the stats are without like going, okay, I figured it out here.
Yeah, you're not going into the book and being like, well, according to this race and this.
But you have with the rules of the book, you have a rough idea of what's going on. Like, if he has 0 skills whatsoever, you have to make 10 in cast. Like, if he has 2 bonus dice.
But it's a rough idea. It's not following the exact rules.
You are following the exact rules.
Well, no. See, I disagree there, because you're not going into the book and making a proper NPC. You're throwing it together on the fly.
Yeah, but you're using the precedence of those rules to ad-lib some numbers without actually going, okay, guys, loading, please wait, I have to write this guy up, which I do sometimes on really important encounters, but, here we go, this is that. And that all that is just, you're just filling in the blanks because you can't be bothered to write up every goblin scout that's in every forest everywhere. Like, that's insane.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but that's not Rule 0.
Okay, well then we're not talking about Rule 0.
Yeah, Rule 0 is literally, I shoot with my crossbow, suddenly your crossbow turns to jelly. Why?
Because
I'm the GM and I said so.
Yeah, that's...
Because crossbows now work that way. They turn to jelly. or the monster shows up and he's like, it's got a gaze attack, so you all take damage. It's like that's not how a gaze attack works. It's like, it does now, baby.
Yeah,
Stuff like that. Like, that's Rule 0. And those are really bad examples that make the GM sound like an asshole.
Well, yes.
But the point is, it could work the other way. It's like, I want to be a unicorn that shoots tornadoes. And you're like, well, girlfriend, I guess you can be a unicorn that shoots tornadoes, even though there's zero precedent in any book anywhere that gives you any of these powers. But you can have that, because Rule 0, woo! And all the other players are like, wow, I wish I could be a giant flying unicorn that shoots tornadoes. Nope, you guys can't. You got to play properly. Or whatever,
Yeah, like, okay.
Rule 0 is the
That's
ability
dumb.
for the GM to act like a doofus. And in the noble tyrant scenario, where, like, you're just like, yeah, I'll fudge the numbers so that the players always win. What you sort of end up with is players who don't care about anything they do because there's no risk.
That's right.
They're always going to win.
I would not. Yeah, this is like I said at the very beginning. We're not talking about player death or player success because you shouldn't really fuck with that.
What you're talking about is DMs playing on the fly. Like, they're playing fast and loose with the rules because they don't have the time in the middle of a session to produce a fully written up character every time a new person comes on the screen.
Right.
Right. And that's not Rule 0. That's just being fast and loose. And honestly,
I consider that still changing the rules or making shit up because that's what you got to do.
Yeah, but as a GM, you're generally running under sort of like you have a concept of what is easy, what is difficult, and what is like basically impossible.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if I'm making a player roll above a 50 in cast,
that's fucking brutal.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
It's not brutal, but it's rough because you can get there.
Well, yeah, like if you're lucky, you got exploding dice and things like that. But yeah, like that's
like the monster that I ran last time. He had 105 defense. That's a big number. But like the characters couldn't breach it. But get a simplicity or two, and they could. Like, cast is a weird system.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. But the point is, you have like a GM usually has a concept of what's medium, like easy, difficult, or easy, medium, difficult. And with that said, they just sort of they'll just shoot them from the hip, being like, yeah, this guy's pretty easy to convince to sell him potions or whatever. Or like the potion maker is probably, it's very difficult to get the potion maker to give you free potions. So your stupid idea is here. Or the potion maker is a master of martial arts because I said so. Great. But
yeah. But and to clarify what I was saying before about D&D being overly ruled, and I brought up that example where a DM doing D&D is probably the worst for trying to remember all the rules.
No, I've worse. Seen, but continue the thought.
Well, I mean, Shadowrun's pretty complicated.
Palladium.
Yeah, Shadowrun's pretty complicated. But I mean, there's so many, because D&D has turned into this big money grab, where they've got all these books out now, books for everything, Monster Compendium, frickin' 29A, like.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Honestly, I think some of the Reddit monster listings do a better job.
Yeah, like.
And things like that, and you could pretty much like. I always say that if the system has, 2 or 3 supplementary material books after their initial I guess D&D usually has the Player's Handbook, DMG Monsters Manual. Like after the first like set of books to play the game, if it's got like 2 or 3 different compendium books, then it's basically you should be able to open. Like there is no precedent anymore. Like everything is just whatever. Because if you can somehow reverse engineer their system, you're just as justified in making whatever you want as using their goofy compendium or extra books, because all they do is power creep them a little bit, add more and more options to people who are, they don't think imaginatively.
The last D&D I was really familiar with is 3.5. I did get familiar with Pathfinder, which at the time they called 3.75. And I did a little bit of D&D 4, but I really lost interest fast. Haven't tried D&D 5 yet, but I hear it's pretty crap.
I like 5th more than 4th.
Oh yeah, 4th was terrible.
5th is Wizards' 5th is just 3rd, but they've stripped out everything that is problematic with the balancing of the system.
And that's what I was about to bring up. Once they released the core books, right? The Dungeons & Masters Handbook, the Player's Handbook, out there, they started adding class handbooks and stuff like this.
They do that with all of them.
And some of them started even contradicting each other.
Yeah, and they've been doing that since second
And this
edition.
is what I was talking about when I came to Rule 0. When you have contradicting rules, like say you have that player, because either you have a GM or you have that player that doesn't know all the rules, and then you have that GM or player that has spent all of their money on these books and has spent all of their time reading them and memorizing all these rules. It comes down to where it's almost impossible to have an enjoyable game, because you're more or less everyone's arguing about what rules we should be using. Well, I think we should be using...
I haven't encountered any scenario where the rules completely contradict each other. Like, I've encountered situations where the rules require a adjudication from the GM because it's not clear what the answer is.
Well, that's... Yeah.
But that's not really Rule 0. That's not overriding rules. Like...
Well, it's adjudicating rules, I guess. Which, okay, maybe, like I said, maybe we're not talking about Rule 0. But this is why I'm continuing to describe where I'm trying to talk about. Because perhaps it's not Rule 0, because you're talking about the more being ignorant of the rules on purpose, more or less. You're being like, either giving the player something or taking away the player something regardless of rules or anything like this. And yes, I definitely disagree with that. That's not good. You should not be doing that. That's impeding.
To me, imagine a player is just like, oh, can we ignore the jumping rules because I want to make the pit jump? And then the GM's like, yeah, okay, you just make it. Like, is that good? That's a Rule 0 override.
If it's like, I'm just walking along and there's a pit and it's no real reason for there to be a pit.
Oh, it doesn't matter. That's an obstacle. It's an obstacle towards the goal that the player has. And the player's just like, yeah, my jumping stat's really bad. I'm never gonna make this. Can we just ignore the pit?
I would say find a way around.
Okay, so in that case, Rule 0, like Rule 0 is trash.
If you're
really
putting an obstacle in the way, why would you Rule 0 it out? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, are you arguing with your own self? Like,
because the player doesn't want to do it.
Well, that's part of the game. Like
I know, that's what I say.
Obstacle games, every game. We're not talking about just pen and paper now. Video games, card games, board games. It's all about overcoming obstacles.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Fair enough. Okay, well...
So if you're going to whine and complain about an obstacle, well then why are you playing the game?
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, I guess we beat the Rule 0 horse pretty much to death here. So would you say that Rule 0 is trash the way I've defined it?
The way you defined it, yes, Rule 0 is trash.
Victory number 2.
But I don't think I was talking about Rule 0.
Yeah, no, you weren't. You weren't. So, yeah, basically it was a miscommunication, and we'll go on from there. Okay, so we've covered these 2 topics. What is there anything else that you were interested? You want to cover the rules for players a little bit?
Well, no. One thing I really wanted to mention, which is really GMs are super guilty of.
Okay.
Especially new ones.
All right.
And I know we're going to get into another argument about this.
All right.
GMs should never say no.
Never say no?
Never say no.
Okay, explain that, because I think I know what you mean, and I might agree with it. But let's see what you're talking about here.
Okay. Now, of course, we're going... See, this is going to really be different from system to system, because Cast is built around never say no. So that's... I mean...
It doesn't matter what the system says. Like,
right.
Let's ignore the system. We're just playing a game. Assume there are no rules or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Like, a player... This happens all the time. Like, a player... I want to, tie a vine to the end of my spear and throw it up into the... a player comes out with a really creative situation out of a problem.
Okay.
And the DM didn't expect it and doesn't want that to happen because it's important for that DM that a player do something a specific way. So they just say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, I would agree that you're not supposed to do that.
And it's so common.
Especially in that situation. It's like, no, you can't. Like, in situations where it obviously wouldn't work, yes, you say no.
Well, yes.
Okay, otherwise it's literally like, oh, you grow wings, you start to fly, you're beautiful, you suddenly become beautiful.
You're beautiful.
Like, if people started, like, adoring you, they worship you, what else would you like, player? Like, would you like some free money? Here, have some free money, God comes down and he gives you a handshake and says, could you teach me things?
But even then...
you're so good.
And I'm going to play devil advocate here. I want to sprout wings and fly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to say no.
No.
I'm not going to say no. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah,
player?
okay. Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like I said, like, if you're just like, yeah, you could try. How?
How are you going to do that? You got to figure out. And you know what? If the
player's like, I want to will myself to sprout wings and fly right now. Not like I want to work towards sprouting wings and fly. I want it now. Stomp foot.
Well,
then what? GM says no? Or no?
I would say
Here.
I would say, and this is kind of a way of saying no, but I would say roll some dice. And the
illusion of chance.
The illusion of chance.
That is saying no. You're just being a manipulative person at that point.
Well, a little bit, but I mean,
you set an impossibly high number. Like in Cast, you could do it because like, okay, the exploding dice could happen. It's like, okay, you try to will yourself to happen. But then again, like then it creates this situation where it's like, okay, I tried and failed. Okay, I do it again next turn. Eventually, the dice will roll in my favor. Eventually, that crit 20 will arrive.
No, then I would try to explain myself. Okay, you try to do it again, but you're too tired. You're going to have to take another action.
Okay, I dance. And then the third action is I try to sprout wings again.
You can't concentrate because you're thinking too much about that delicious dance you just did.
Oh, okay.
See, well, I would try very hard. Like, right now you're describing a player that really shouldn't be playing D&D.
I'm describing a situation that requires you to say no to a player.
But I would try very hard to not say no. I would try to make a story.
I can't disagree with that. Like that's like rule 1 of rules for players, or rules for GMs, which is basically your plot is stupid.
Yeah.
The point of that rule is GMs are supposed to facilitate the story of the players, right?
Yes.
Like this is their story. So when the player's just like, I want to sprout wings and fly, you go, okay, how do you do that? And if they don't have an answer, you say no. You can't. Because your story, the hurdle before you is physical reality. How do you defeat physical reality?
Well, you'd probably find a wizard.
That is the de facto answer for most D&D games. Find a wizard.
Find a wizard.
Become a powerful wizard. who might help you.
Wizards who specializes in willing wings.
Yeah, exactly, and that might be a way to go about it. But if the player is just ignoring the obstacles of physical reality or whatever rules have been set forth, like to arbitrate the game.
Maybe I'm giving players too much credit because, yes, I've had some pretty silly players and I've also been a pretty silly player. But at the same point, maybe... I
think it's just that only a Sith deals in absolutes here.
Yeah. Like,
in your case, is what you're talking about?
Yeah, like, I don't think I've ever had a person that just requested really, really ridiculous things and stomping their foot and saying, I want this to happen. All the players I've ever played with...
Well, you have to take these things to goofy extremes to sort of try to find the truth of something, right? Like, take an idea to its logical conclusion. A DM should never say no. Okay, well, you find some insufferable player who wants to do all sorts of stupid things. A good example is the GM, the player says, I want to have that other player explode with my mind.
How would you do that?
I just think it. I want it to happen. Can I roll a die?
I would say you're trying to use a psionic ability that you don't have.
Well, whatever.
And I would probably make up some sort of complex rule.
Can I have it now? No, you can't. Well, why not? GMs are not supposed to say no.
Well, what's stopping you from having it right now? You have no points to spend. Well, you have to wait until you level up.
I want points then. Can I get some inspiration and have some free points?
Role play a situation.
Okay, I role play. And then a bunch of grunting and moaning, and that's me exerting myself and getting what I want.
Well,
that's good role play. You should be rewarded that with character points. You see what I'm saying here?
Grunting is amazing role.
But this is what I'm saying. Is that you once you start putting this like GM should never say no, it becomes very.
Well, okay.
You can create these situations with the players just like, yeah, this is what I want. Why can't I do it? And yeah, you can have a milquetoast kind of like a really simple like a situation where fudging the rules or like saying no to somebody isn't really valuable, but it's the extremes that discover the truth of things, and the truth is the GM should say no.
Well, okay.
To stupidity.
The GM should say no.
Things that don't conform to physical reality. Yeah, you should say no. I want this. No, you don't have any character points for it yet. Oh, okay, I got to get character points. Yes, you got to get character points. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying you can't do it right now.
Yeah.
You want to sprout wings and fly like a bird? This may be possible. Or, if the setting doesn't permit it, this is not possible. You might have to build the wings with machines. Oh, that's not what I want. Well, you live in the real world, and that's the setting, is like the real world. Humans don't pop wings. They can build them, maybe. You could become like a weird...
You could try to genetically...
Icarus kind of thing. Yeah, I guess so. You can use some weird science magic and make it happen, but like this is now... We're basically entering the realms of it's back to magic.
But even as stupid as a player can get, I still think you should try really hard not to just... I guess it's not... Should never say no. Should never just say no.
Well, you should facilitate the player's desires.
Yes.
Try your best. But if the desires are unreasonable or they are, incomprehensible, I guess, or whatever, no. Or they can or they give it some weird undue advantage over the other players for no reason, where it's just like, oh yeah, can I just manifest gold in my hands? Like, I've had people who are like, my character's an alchemist. I just produce gold for free. And you're like, what? How? Oh, because I'm an alchemist. I wrote it in my backstory.
Okay, but how does your alchemist...
No, I don't know.
Well, then it doesn't
because I'm an alchemist. I wrote it in my backstory. Like, that's... Or you'll have players... Like, I've had players that have been like, like, the whole backstory thing is like, my backstory says that I have an evil enemy. And the evil enemy doesn't like the players that I'm playing with, and he'll attack them because he's all powerful. He's like 20th level.
Well,
like, they'll write characters so that you can write...
Isn't that the fourth wall now that we're talking about?
Well, players have written characters so that they can have an all-powerful villain, which is the real character that they want to play, and that all-powerful villain is supposed to show up and fight the characters and kill everybody but that player. because he's cursed to be left alive. Or something stupid. Like,
Yeah, that's...
and this is where you look at the character sheet and you go, no. That's ridiculous. And all you're doing is... Like, I see what you're doing and I say no. Or, I see what you're doing, but I'm not going to let you be cursed to stay alive.
Yeah, that's pretty dumb. But even then, even in the extreme situations, you should try to reason with a player or try to storytell your way around things.
Yeah, that's I think the sign of a good GM.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. This is the whole reason why we're doing this, is to, nail some fine points on good GMing, like, because I've seen so many, especially like about 2 to 3 years ago, when I was still like, I don't really play the pen and paper that much anymore. There's only really one GM that I really care about ever playing a game with anymore because of the storytelling, and I did about maybe 2 or 3 years ago was playing a bunch of different games with a bunch of different DMs, and they were all, in my opinion, and I know this is going to sound elitist or whatever, but they were bad because they would just say, no, I don't want, like, no, I don't want a paladin in my game, so you can't be a paladin. Well, why? Well, because I just don't want one in there. It's just going to fuck things up. Well, why? Well, it's just going to fuck things up.
Yeah, it's just whatever. Okay, and I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. Like, I always like the idea of giving players what they kind of let them be like, yeah, okay, you can do this thing. Like, I've had people play ridiculous characters. And I'm like, fine, whatever. You want to be immune to all physical damage? Fine, you can do that.
Yeah, there's one player that we both know that made a fucking glowing tree monkey. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
Like, the thing that I really wanted to impress with anyone that wants to start GMing, if anyone ever listens to this that wants to start GMing, is remember that you are providing a service to the players. You are not their god.
Yeah.
You are entertaining them. They want to tell a story through your setting, and you're there to help them do that, to make it entertaining, while at the same point introducing risks and giving rewards for overcoming obstacles, making things exciting and challenging for them to get from where they want to go in their story. That's you are basically on stage. You're the entertainer, they're the audience.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a closing statement to me. Well, all right, Mr. the DuckLord. I thank you for coming onto the show, and I hope our audience, despite some of the, a little bit of weird situations with the phone ringing and the pizza guy and all this other stuff, I hope you had an enjoyable listen to this podcast. I don't know how much actual sort of real chunk of discussion that we got into. The Rule Zero one was it took quite a while, but you know what? I think this was a good episode overall. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I certainly did. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to, if you'd be interested in doing this again, and we come up with some subjects, we could probably do it again. Or if you want, we could start a separate series. The DuckLord and I can go and talk about other things. We can produce some sort of topics, a series of topics if you want.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Okay. Well,
it was good.
Everybody who is listening, feel free to comment in the comments section, and like and subscribe, buy that merch, etc., etc. But yeah, comment in the comment section. What do you think? If you guys have any sort of gripes about the rules for players or the rules for GMs, just throw it on in there. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or get into the brass tacks of it. And maybe if people want to come on and hash it out in a audio format or whatever, we can do that. Or even if you just want to have a bunch of points you want us to go through in a similar kind of epilogue episode, just throw them down in the comments. Or I think YouTube actually has some weird messaging system, so you can always just PM me if you don't want the scrutiny of the internet, gazing upon you. But with that said, I hope everybody who's listening goes out, has a great night, and don't die on me. Bye-bye.